I got a scholarship to Oxford where I did politics and economics, and then worked for over 20 years for the Electricians Union. I was a Labour councillor in South London, and then have been a Member of Parliament in the West Midlands for 27 years. And in government I was Defence Minister, Transport, Northern Ireland, and then Deputy Chief Whip in opposition. I'm being incredibly busy. We have had a huge upsurge in casework from constituents. I've got one of the most multicultural constituencies in the country. The Guardian newspaper estimated there's about 134 languages spoken in my constituency, a number of people stranded abroad, and quite frankly our Foreign Office was way behind the curve compared with other countries in helping people to get back to the UK. Of course, a lot of people facing problems with the benefit system and furlough, and indeed now increasingly unemployment. So all of these have added enormously to the casework. And then, Parliament has still been operating. It's been very unusual and different, but basically it's a 7-day-a-week job, which is not dissimilar sometimes from usual, but in rather different circumstances. Not really. I mean, I've always put in the hours, always done a considerable amount of work, whether it's been as a local councillor or a union or a trade union official, or as a government minister. And of course in the United Kingdom, ministers are also members of Parliament, so you have that double workload. And when I was in Northern Ireland, of course, also travelling backwards and forwards to Belfast to do the job as well. So the work side of it didn't change very much. The particular nature of the COVID pandemic is unusual. However, as a government minister, I'd been involved in planning for a pandemic, basically around influenza, but an influenza against which there was not any defences. And that's obviously been things like avian flu, and also when influenza are combined with pigs. And what slightly surprised me in the government's response is that many of the lessons and the basic practices and schemes that we had worked out don't seem to have clicked in as efficiently, as effectively as I'd have thought. I'd have thought as soon as it became clear, and I understand the problems with the lack of data coming out of China, but as soon as it became clear, I would have thought that the COBRA, the government's emergency management system, would have clicked into place. And I'm surprised that it didn't seem to. Well, I think really it relates to the way that the government have handled it at every stage. There does seem to have been a lot of dither and delay. And I've said to the chairman of our parliamentary committee that deals with public administration that there needs to be a major and in-depth inquiry as to what seems to have been the hollowing out of the British civil service. It's a matter of considerable concern to me that a body that previously I'd seen working very efficiently and effectively does not seem to have either the doctrine or the capacity in order to undertake this task. And also they don't seem to have involved the key people who really do understand contingency planning, which is the military. There's been some involvement, but it came quite late. And certainly I saw in aviation, getting people back from overseas, that other countries were way ahead, and we have some of the world's best aviation planners in the Royal Air Force, and they don't seem to have been used properly. I think it's potentially disastrous. I'm anticipating that there will be large-scale redundancies unless we can get the economy back moving again. And that's not just about furlough payments and benefits. That's actually about getting work started again. And I think there is increasing concern at the lack of attention to maintaining jobs real actual jobs that are producing things, I fully understand the need to maintain capacity and to make sure that people are ready for an upturn in demand. But that demand has to be there. And government has to manage that, and I'm pleased, for example, to see car showrooms opening. But I also think government, as purchaser as well, government is a huge purchaser. They ought to be stepping up to the mark, bringing forward purchases, particularly from British firms and British workers. I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure how this relates to the Depression. I think that it's certainly potentially as bad as the 1980 recession, when we had the start of the oil boom and a massive rise in interest rates, and industry across the North and the Midlands was smashed by a deliberate act of policy by the Thatcher government. And that was absolutely devastating. I was a member of Parliament in the West Midlands briefly in that period, and it was a terrible time. But the actual numbers may well start to get towards the Depression levels, and in that case we are going to have to look at major programs of direct public works. Particularly I would like to see a major increase in council house building to get that economy moving and to get money moving through into people's pockets and moving through the economy. Otherwise this will be a long-term crisis, and I think a major political and social crisis as well. But that when people are talking about apprenticeships, they've got to be real apprenticeships. The civil service seem to think a 3-week course, 3 weeks in Tesco stacking shelves is labelled as an apprenticeship. That's not what the public understand by apprenticeships. They mean training people to be electricians, plumbers, carpenters, and also in many of the new trades as well, particularly in IT. But they've got to be proper training, and government, again, as customer, should be insisting that their suppliers provide those proper traineeship schemes, and they're doing nothing like that. The problem is the British civil service all the way through has only really understood, been interested in or concerned about tertiary education, about universities. They have no regard for training, they do not understand it, and they will not work with people who do. This is going to require a major shake-up in the way that this country is run. It's not just about money, it's about culture, it's about deep policy. I think China has a considerable responsibility, particularly in the delays in letting the rest of the world, and particularly the scientific community, have access to the data. It's very clear that specialists in China were concerned at a much earlier stage and basically were repressed by the Communist Party machinery. And China, but the rest of the world, has paid a very, very heavy cost for that. But let's be clear, there are always going to be pandemics. There are always going to be viruses against which there is no defence, or limited defence. And that we've seen that with MERS, we've seen that with SARS. This happens to have been far more dramatic. But quite frankly, government, certainly when I was a minister, was anticipating that there would be a pandemic at some stage. It's inherent in the condition of the world. What we need to be is properly prepared internationally and nationally to plan for that. But China's actions and the actions of the Chinese Communist leadership and the Chinese Communist system certainly have a degree of responsibility. I think that's basically a blind alley. I don't think there's any international mechanism for seeking compensation. I think that people should be focused on, one, how they get the virus under control, how they prevent the further spread, and particularly a second wave, and how we get the British and indeed the world economy back working again. And there are other issues with regard to China and its impact on the world, and the question of the threat that it poses to free societies. But I think worrying about sort of litigation may be good for lawyers. I can't see that it solves any problems. With difficulty, China is a fact. China is a major country, but what it does mean that there has to be a reset of British policy. In the Cameron Osborne era, there was gross appeasement of China, unrealistic appeasement. Now that doesn't mean that we have to go into a state of hostility to China, but maybe we do have to contain China, and we do have to work with other free countries around the world in order to create an international alliance that actually sets limits on Chinese behaviour and Chinese ambitions and aggression, particularly in many developing countries where China is subverting those countries, often a very bad deal for the people of those countries as well, and is also accommodating dictators far too much. But we also have to have long-term thinking on this. The Chinese think, plan and operate on a very much a long-term basis. Too much of politics in the West, but also to an extent elsewhere in the world, is on a short-term basis. We actually need long-term planning, long-term objectives. We have to work with China. China is a fact, and we have to work with that. But at the same time, we should stop appeasing the Chinese Communist Party, which may be not as stable as they like us to believe.